What do these three women have in common? They're beautiful, yes. They're successful, yes. And they're in the prime of their lives, definitely yes. But each of them has already been diagnosed with and treated for breast cancer while still in their 20s and 30s, making them the new face of breast cancer. This hour on It's Your Call, we learn more about young survivors and why the number of cases in young women is on the rise. And it all begins right now. We are continuing our commitment to breast cancer awareness here on It's Your Call today with a look at a topic we have not yet covered in all the years I've done this show. Today we look at the startling reality that breast cancer is striking our youngest women. Hello everyone, and thanks so much for joining us. I'm Lynn Doyle. You know, for most of the 16 seasons that we've been on, we have devoted several shows every year to breast cancer, in part because of my own mother's experience as a survivor. But this one is especially daunting to me because I have learned that breast cancer is now affecting our young women, women in their 20s and 30s, the same ages as my own daughters. Now, I first became aware of how prevalent this is becoming when my friend Cindy Davis Gale and I walked in the 3-day walk in San Diego a couple of years ago. And we met women of the same age as our daughters who were participating not as walkers, but as survivors. We were absolutely shocked that there were so many in this age group, only to learn that more and more women under 40 are now being diagnosed and that they have lower survival rates than other women. I don't know about you, but that scares me. In just a moment, we're going to meet 3 women who have survived and who are now dedicated to spreading the word about breast cancer in young women and the issues that they have to deal with that perhaps we older women do not. First, though, I'd like you to meet Dr. Catherine Carruthers, who is a breast surgeon with Holy Redeemer's Breast Health Program and who practices with Holy Redeemer's Comprehensive Breast Care Surgeons, which is located in the Philadelphia area. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me, Lynn.
I want to clarify by saying that when we talk about young women, we're talking about women who are under 40. And according to the National Cancer Institute, of the more than 225,000 cases that were reported in the last year, more than 10,000 of those involved women in this age group. Do we have any indication as to why we're seeing an increase?
That's really a difficult question. Obviously, we think about genetics. There are certain genes that can be linked to breast cancer at an early age, but we also wonder about obesity. Obesity is definitely linked to increased risk of breast cancer. There are some new studies that suggest that there may be a link between birth control pills and breast cancer risk as well, which is very scary because of the number of women who are taking birth control. Other than that, alcohol can be linked to breast cancer as well. So there's a lot of things that we look at.
So we need to tell our young women in their 20s and 30s that this is a topic that no longer belongs exclusively in discussions with their mothers, that they need to be aware of their own bodies.
That's correct. It's something where every time they go to the doctor, it should be a discussion. Is this the right medication for me? Are there risks associated with what I'm doing, with my lifestyle, with my body? What should I be doing to limit my risk?
And we need to get them to see the doctor because so many times
Absolutely.
Young women think, oh, I don't need to go.
That's right.
You know, I've got my birth control and that's it. There's no other need for me to go. So we need to get that message out. What I found particularly disturbing was that this age group was more likely to die if diagnosed with breast cancer because it somehow affects them biologically differently. I mean, that's heartbreaking.
Right. Well, women who are young who are diagnosed with breast cancer are more typically diagnosed when they've felt a lump, rather than women who are over the age of 40 are getting yearly screening mammograms, so we may catch something that we can't feel. In a young woman, typically she feels something, and by that time the cancer is more advanced. The cancers are usually more aggressive in the younger women as well, so you have a combination of a larger cancer and a more aggressive cancer in a young woman, and it's very devastating.
That is devastating and very scary. If you have daughters like I do who are in their late 20s, early 30s, right, we have to get the word out to them. And that's what our guests here today are going to do for us. If you have questions or comments and you would like to join in, please email me at lynn@lynndoyle.net. We're going to talk a little bit more about those specific risk factors later in the show, so stick with us for that. But I do want to share some personal stories with you, stories that really impacted me when I heard them. We've begin with Jennifer Mershdorf, who is the CEO of Young Survival Coalition, who was diagnosed at age 36 as she was helping her very own mother through her own breast cancer ordeal. Jennifer, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
I know when my mother had breast cancer, how it impacted me just as her daughter to see her go through it. What was it like for you when you were in the middle of helping your mom through this ordeal to find out that you yourself had breast cancer?
I think that we saved each other through the experience. You know, we had no cancer in our family before my mother was diagnosed, and when I was then diagnosed, we bonded together, and she went into mom mode. And immediately, you're going to be fine. We're going to get through this, and we've done it together. It's who would have thought?
Who would have thought? And yet, what you went through differs from what she went through. The way that it biologically, physically, mentally affects a young woman has been determined to be somewhat different than an older woman.
That's correct.
What was your personal experience?
I think fertility is a huge issue. And understanding the treatment decisions that you make and how it will affect your ability to have children. My husband and I don't have children at this point, so that was a very big part of it, very different than my mother's experience. And she was after menopause and had her family, and also career. You know, I'm just in the middle of my career. My mother is retired.
So the differences, obviously, of a young woman who's facing breast cancer are greater, or not greater, but different.
They're different
than an older woman. But I'm wondering, when you started to do some research on your own and you found out that the statistics indicate that young women frequently die from this, how you were able to digest that information and subsequently handle it.
I think a lot of it has been through my work through the Young Survival Coalition, and after 7 or 8 months after I was diagnosed, I was the honor of becoming the CEO of this amazing organization that helped me, and been able to use that as a way to work through the differences between the two of us.
Because you found that there weren't a whole lot of support groups
That's
for
correct.
women your age,
That's
right?
correct. Yeah.
And that's probably one of the things that we want to get the word out about the most, is that this support system is so important for
That's right.
getting through this, if in fact you have gotten that kind of diagnosis. Seeking out that support led her to the Young Survival Coalition, of which she is the CEO now, but it's ultimately where she met our next guest, Lisa Frank, who is the president of the board of directors of Young Survival Coalition and is the founder of Tour de Pink, which is a 220-plus mile multi-day bike ride which benefits the organization. She too was diagnosed at just age 36. Lisa, thanks for sharing your story.
Thanks, Lynn.
Why do you feel it's so important to tell people what happened to you personally?
Well, when I was diagnosed, I was 36 years old, and I didn't know anybody. And I ended up at the very first meeting of what would become the Young Survival Coalition. I was fortunate to meet this amazing group of women. And through that experience, and I've had 2 recurrences now, and everything I've done through my breast cancer journey has somehow involved YSC and the amazing women I've met. So it's so important that young women know there's a resource for them and they're not alone.
And that's what we're trying to do, not only make young women and their parents aware that this is striking people at a young age, but also that there is a support, not just here in the Philadelphia area, but all across the country. There are different operations that are available for these young women. How was it that you came to be diagnosed with stage 1 breast cancer back in 1998?
I actually would do monthly breast self-exams, hopefully regularly, and I was lying in bed and talking on the phone to my best friend, and I said, oh, I forgot, I haven't done my breast self-exam. And lying in bed on the phone, discovered a lump, and called my gynecologist, who said, it's probably nothing because you're so young, but we need to have it checked out. Went for a mammography, and they did a sonogram and said, this is an cyst, you need to go to a breast surgeon.
And the breast surgeon made what decision?
So initially, he did a needle biopsy, which was inconclusive, but he also said, you have a lump in your breast, which doesn't belong there. So the suggestion is to remove it, and when we removed it, he walked into the recovery room and said, you have breast cancer. I said, am I going to die? He said, no. And I shut down and my mother took over.
Thank goodness for our moms. Exactly. So tell me, if you can, the impact of that diagnosis, hearing that. Even though he told you that you would live, Did you have an image of what would happen or how you would be affected as a breast cancer patient?
So I don't know that you truly comprehend when that happens, when you initially hear those words. I think the benefit for me was I was able to meet other young women like myself very soon thereafter. So whatever I wasn't processing and whatever I wasn't believing that I could die, I could be sick, all these things, I processed once I met all these women and saw these amazing women who were at various stages of their diagnosis and treatment, and they gave me a lot of hope and support.
How challenging was it when you had a recurrence? I know right before you organized this race and wanted to get the word out about it that you were diagnosed again and were unable to participate the first year. Did you ever just look upward and say, why me?
Yes. It was a little startling because it was 6 years after my first diagnosis.
Yeah, it's like, hey, I've done this already.
Exactly. I've gone through chemo, I've gone through radiation, why this? So it was really quite startling. And my first phone call was to the woman who was running YSC at the time and just went into, how do we take care of this? You know, what are the doctors, who do I need, what doctors do I need, and what do I need to do?
And that's what you need to do, is to have a plan and to have support and to have a great doctor. We're going to talk more about this. When we come back, we're going to learn more about the Young Survival Coalition and the Tour de Pink. But first, we're going to introduce you to Stacy Leung, who was just 23 years old when she learned that she had breast cancer. You heard me correctly. I said 23. Hers is a story that you won't want to miss, so please stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. This is It's Your Call. I'm Lynn Doyle, where we are talking about breast cancer in young women. When I say young women, I mean women under the age of 40, and how the statistics are indicating that cases in that age group may be increasing. Stacy Leung was just 23 when she became one of those statistics. She had graduated from college and was working in her career in finance when she learned that she had stage 2 triple negative breast cancer. Stacy, as shocking as Jennifer and Lisa's cases are, your case really took my breath away. 23 years old. Were you absolutely stunned to find out that you had breast cancer?
Actually, when I got the phone call, I thought it was a joke. I kind of laughed. I'm like, oh, you sure you don't have me mixed up with someone else? But that's the reality of it all, and kind of treatment just followed real shortly after.
I can't believe that you could just say that was the reality of it all. I mean, when I was in San Diego and these young survivors were walking in front of my friend Cindy and I, they were wearing sashes that had the age at which they had been diagnosed. We had tears in our eyes. It's like, why would young women like that have to go through this? It's bad enough for any woman of any age. Did you accept it immediately and look for a plan of survival, or did it take you a while to kind of let it all sink in?
I think it didn't really sink in until I was in that chair waiting for surgery that morning. I mean, we'll talk about it and everything like that, but when treatment isn't in place and you don't know exactly what's going to happen or what stage you're at, you can't really, it doesn't seem real at the time. Like, you know, you have a plan, you have to do X, Y, Z, but it just doesn't really stick. Like, you don't really think it's happening.
Were there particular risk factors in your life, or a genetic link that caused you to have breast cancer, or are you just one of those statistics that we hear about frequently that no one knows why you had it?
Right, yeah, no one knows. I've had the genetic testing for BRCA1 and 2. Both came back negative. So, I mean, they say lifestyle, you know, in college, drinking, there's a whole bunch of variables and factors that could come into play, but no one really can put a finger on it.
You mentioned the college lifestyle. You're just barely out of college, just starting your life, and then you get this diagnosis. I mean, someone else in their 20s, they probably can't even relate to the fact that everything came to a grinding halt. There was not going to be any more partying. Your career had to come to a standstill. Your relationship was affected. I mean, can you characterize what it did to your life?
If anything good were to come from this, it definitely changed my perspective on a lot of things. I kind of have a newfound appreciation for where I am in life and the support that I have. I have family and friends that are great, but at the end of the day, they're not in my shoes, so they can't fully understand what I'm going through.
What kind of treatment did each of you have to go through individually. Can you share that with us?
Yeah, I did all hormone treatment, so I did not do chemo.
Okay. And how about you, Lisa?
Oh, I have the whole list. I've had a lumpectomy, a double mastectomy, a full hysterectomy. Both times I've done chemo. I've had 2 rounds of radiation, and I'm currently undergoing a maintenance treatment to keep my cancer from spreading again.
Oh, and how about you, Stacy?
Because I have triple negative breast cancer, hormone therapy isn't an option. So I had to go through the chemo and the radiation and had a lumpectomy.
And the prognosis for everyone is good?
Doing
Good
great.
health?
Yeah,
We wish
NED.
that. We hope that. Now what we want to do is, because these 3 ladies have been so gracious in sharing their stories, we wanted to put a face on breast cancer in young women so that you realize it doesn't happen to somebody else, it could actually happen to you. So we want to go back to Dr. Carruthers and talk about the risk factors. We just briefly talked about some of them, but I know everyone at home is wondering about the genetic connection and whether if your mom has it, if it definitely means you could have it.
Right, so obviously the genetic connection is very important. If your mother had breast cancer, particularly if your mother had a breast cancer at in premenopausal, so under the age of 50 typically, that does increase your risk of having breast cancer. But really any first degree relative who's had breast cancer increases your risk. But it doesn't mean that you're going to get breast cancer. So some women come into our office and they say, my mom had breast cancer, so I'm just waiting until I get breast cancer. That's a terrible way to live, and it's really not accurate. They have a great chance at doing well. However, there are other risks. There are other risk factors, particularly like we were talking about the BRCA1 and BRCA2 genes, and these are linked to an extremely high risk of breast cancer. 87% chance of having breast cancer by the age of 80 if you carry a BRCA1 or a BRCA2 abnormality.
And yet you can't just go into your gynecologist's office and say, hey, I want to have the BRCA test.
Absolutely not.
Right? I mean,
No.
it's just not something you can't go to the
Right.
local pharmacy and say, test me for breast cancer.
Right.
Although, personally, I think we ought to be able to, because then maybe we could stop this before it goes any further.
Right. And
So what are the qualifications that you need to have in order to have
a
that
test. So the testing, typically if you're under the age of 45, even if there's no family history, almost every insurance company will cover the test. If you have family history and you're over the age of 45, you have to meet certain criteria. They're what we call red flags for breast cancer.
Okay.
Any woman who's triple negative under the age of 60 qualifies for the test, whether she has a family history or not.
Earlier in the show, one thing that the doctor mentioned that I know probably sent red flags up with our audience was birth control.
Right.
That kind of concern whether or not if people, the majority of women over a certain age who are sexually active are using birth control or birth control pills, should they be concerned that it will cause breast cancer?
We really don't know. There are studies that
I hate that answer.
I know. The studies are conflicting. So we have some studies that suggest there is an increased risk of breast cancer. Other studies suggest there isn't. In women who have the genes that we're talking about, the BRCA1 and 2 genes, we actually sometimes use birth control pills in those women because those genes are also linked to increased risk of ovarian cancer. And the birth control can actually cut their risk of ovarian cancer. So there are pluses and minuses to the therapy. You have to weigh the risks and benefits with your own doctor and choose for yourself.
Right, of course. And you did mention the obesity. And the other issue that we wanted to talk about that's not represented on the show today, but we do want to address it, is that African American women are being diagnosed at a rapid pace, particularly young women. Any particular indication as to why?
They just, for some reason, some of the cancers seem to be more aggressive and are appearing in younger African American women. I don't think we have a full understanding why, because even if you break it down and you look at women who are obese or not obese, the cancers in the African American women in both of those categories still seem to be more aggressive.
Okay, so we've talked about some of these risk factors. If you have any questions, Dr. Carruthers is going to address those for us. You can email me at lynn@lynndoyle.net, and then we will pass them along to her. And of course, for our very brave ladies who have come on here to share their stories as well. I think probably the most heartbreaking thing when people understand breast cancer under 40 is that so many times it affects fertility, and that that just, for so many of us, being able to have children defines our femininity or womanhood. That kind of thing is not just losing the breast, but the actual chance that you may not be able to have that experience. Did you find that was something that you had to struggle with?
Yeah, at 23, kids are not the first thing that's on my mind, you know, and you're kind of forced to make that decision. And I went through fertility preservation. I was lucky to have that option, and my insurance covered it because a lot of them don't.
And they should. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, see, that's another aspect that we could probably spend an entire hour talking about as well, but we do have to take another quick break. When we come back, we want to talk about this Tour de Pink and what a force it's become, and we want to tell you how you can get involved, because really, this is something that brings the whole community together and helps all of these ladies who are undergoing breast cancer treatment. Stay with us. You are looking at scenes taken from this year's Tour de Pink, which is the annual 220-plus mile bike ride that raises money for the Young Survival Coalition. Ladies, as we look at these more, I want to give a chance for everybody to keep seeing them. Tell me what this ride means to you. First, Lisa, why did you want to create this ride?
So I was a charity cyclist, and I did charity events, and my co-founder Matt was a racer, and we both said, we want to do something that women and everybody can participate in, that's healthy, fun, and a challenge.
And Jennifer, I know that this is an important part of,
Yes.
of your life, and also part of this moving forward with life after breast cancer. What did it mean to be able to participate?
It meant that I was taking my body back from cancer. And it meant that it didn't beat me. And it was a very powerful weekend.
Yeah, it looks beautiful. And Stacy, how about you? It was something that you wanted to be a part of as well, right?
Yeah, kind of a self-validation type of thing. You know, finishing treatment in February, being able to ride in September was huge for me.
So how do people get involved here? It's too late for this year, obviously, but you're doing it every year, right?
Well, if your viewers are listening from the West Coast, we have the West Coast ride coming up on October 11th. Go to ysctourdepink.org. Has all the information about all our rides, our multi-day rides, our single-day ride, and our indoor rides. And we'll be posting next year's dates very soon.
Okay, let's get out there and show these ladies that we support the cause. And we've learned today that not only can it affect women of all ages, but having the support of other women who have gone through this is vital to your survivor. What message would you like to leave in the minds of the viewers?
Young women can and do get breast cancer. And the Young Survival Coalition, YSC, is the community to support you. You're not alone.
You're not alone. As Lisa, you know,
Absolutely.
as you're still going through it, we wish you the best of luck and good health. And Stacy, for you, you're now 24, back working.
Yeah. Well, student now.
Student
Little-
now,
little
because you
life
want to
changing.
change your
Yes.
you want to change your life direction now as a result of this.
You just gotta be your own advocate for your own health, and don't take no for an answer if you don't feel comfortable with it.
Very good advice, and the best advice always comes from Dr. Carruthers and her group there at Holy Redeemer. We thank you for being here. Is there something that we want to make sure that people know about this particular issue?
I think it's really important for women to remember that they know their body best. If you check your breasts every month and you feel something different, don't ever ignore that. Don't ever let someone say, oh, it's nothing, you're too young, this can't happen to you. If you feel something's wrong, you go get it checked. You make sure that you're your own advocate, just like Stacy said.
Great advice. Ladies, thank you so much. I'm in your debt for sharing your stories so that we could perhaps save lives. I do want to thank all of the guests for telling their stories, and I do want to encourage all the young women out there to take this issue seriously. As the doctor said, if you have any of the risk factors that we've talked about, or you find something that doesn't seem right, don't put it off. Don't become a statistic. Thanks so much. See you next time.